Before we get into the story, it is important to understand the events of what was going on with the settlers in the Native American nations of that time, and how a case of mistaken identity led to the tragic life of Jenny Wiley. 300 years ago, the southern Appalachian Mountains were home to the Cherokee Nation. Over 50 towns and settlements were connected by a well-worn system of foot trails. Our story begins with the proclamations and some of the treaties that were made concerning the land and the expansion of the colonies. The descriptions and complete list of events are in no way exhaustive, but their purpose is to describe what is happening in the 1700s in North America at that time. Links are provided below for you to find out more information on the topics. The Treaty of Paris was signed on February the 10th, 1763, by the kingdoms of Great Britain, France, and Spain, with Portugal in agreement. This treaty ended the French part of the French and Indian War, also known as the 7 Years' War, between Great Britain and France, as well as their respective allies. In the treaty, the French agreed to give up all territories in the mainland North America, and they would effectively end any foreign military threat to the British colonies. Great Britain would gain all the French territory east of the Mississippi River, while Spain would retain Cuba and the French would get back the Caribbean islands, along with the territories in India, Africa, and the Mediterranean island of Minorca. The British government also promised to allow the French Canadians to freely practice Catholicism and provided for the French fishing rights off of Newfoundland. The Royal Proclamation of 1763 is the treaty that ended the Great Britain part of the French and Indian War, also known as the 7 Years' War between Great Britain and France, as well as the respective allies. This agreement was issued on October 7, 1763, by King George III. The edict forbade private citizens and colonial governments from the following: buying land, making any agreements. Only licensed traders would be allowed to conduct trade of any kind. All official business would be conducted by the Empire of Britain, and no settlements beyond the line of the Appalachian Mountains. This was agreed upon to keep down the attacks from both parties upon the other, and was a ceasefire of sorts. This ceasefire lasted until the Revolutionary War in 1776. By 1774, the Ohio Valley was no longer populated by the Native American tribes, but was seen as a hunting ground for all tribes, as this land was populated due to the intertribal wars of the 17th century. The tribes were fighting off Daniel Boone, as well as other explorers and settlers, from taking ground and resettling the area. This led to Lord Dunmore's War of 1774. The Shawnee of Kentucky was watching with great distress as the last obstacles to the conquest of Virginia was happening before their eyes. Encroachment was happening on their grounds by white trappers, traders, speculators, and settlers. Sometime early in 1774, the Virginia militia seized Fort Pitt and renamed it Fort Dunmore, for the royal governor, John Murray, 4th Earl of Dunmore. Even though the Moravian-influenced Delaware Indians were mainly peaceful, Lord Dunmore and his men started carrying out the aggression against them, who they felt might harm settlers. However, the Shawnee under Chief Cornstalk sprang into action on October 10, 1774, at the Battle of Point Pleasant. The Shawnee were defeated and agreed to the Treaty of Camp Charlotte to protect their families from attack. This war is often referred to as the first battle of the Revolutionary War because Lord Dunmore often used battles with natives to divert Virginians from differences with the royal administration of that colony. Treaty after treaty between the Native American nations and the colonists saw lands being eroded away. The Cherokee lands of Georgia, eastern Tennessee, and western North and South Carolina were already being chopped up and given to colonists by what was seen as a weak leadership by the young braves at that time. The Six Nations of the Iroquois League were also losing their territories to land encroachment. During and after the Revolutionary War, this overtaking of the lands began happening at an alarming pace. At the end of the war, many Iroquois relocated north of the new border into Canada rather than to stay in New York and deal with the Americans. It was shortly after this time that the marriage and birth of the children of Jenny and Thomas Wiley took place. In our next video, we will discuss the Wiley family and the events that took place on October 1st, 1789.